Chapter 8. Advance on Monterey, the Black Fort, the Battle of Monterey, surrender of the city. The advance from Camargo was commenced on the 5th of September. The army was divided into 4 columns, separated from each other by 1 day's march. The advance reached Cerralvo in 4 days and halted for the remainder of the troops to come up. By the 13th, the rear guard had arrived, and the same day the advance resumed its march, followed as before, a day separating the divisions. The forward division halted again at Marin, 24 miles from Monterey. Both this place and Cerralvo were nearly deserted, and men, women, and children were seen running and scattered over the hills as we approached. But when the people returned, they found all their abandoned property safe, which must have given them a favorable opinion of Los Gringos, the Yankees. From Marin the movement was en masse. On the 19th, General Taylor, with his army, was encamped at Walnut Springs, within 3 miles of Monterey. You are listening this book at VolantLife Radio. The town is on a small stream coming out of the mountain pass and is backed by a range of hills of moderate elevation. To the north, between the city and Walnut Springs, stretches an extensive plain. On this plain, and entirely outside of the last houses of the city, stood a strong fort, enclosed on all sides, to which our army gave the name of Black Fort. Its guns commanded the approaches to the city to the full extent of their range. There were 2 detached spurs of hills, or mountains, to the north and northwest of the city, which were also fortified. On one of these stood the bishop's palace. The road to Saltillo leaves the upper or western end of the city under the fire of the guns from these heights. The lower or eastern end was defended by 2 or 3 small detached works, armed with artillery and infantry. To the south was the mountain stream before mentioned, and back of that the range of foothills. The plaza in the center of the city was the citadel, properly speaking. All the streets leading from it were swept by artillery, cannon being entrenched behind temporary parapets. The housetops near the plaza were converted into infantry fortifications by the use of sandbags for parapets. Such were the defenses of Monterey in September 1847. General Ampudia, with a force of certainly 10,000 men, was in command. General Taylor's force was about 6,500 strong, in 3 divisions, under Generals Butler, Twiggs, and Worth. The troops went into camp at Walnut Springs, while the engineer officers, under Major Mansfield, a general in the late war, commenced their reconnaissance. Major Mansfield found that it would be practicable to get troops around, out of range of the Black Fort and the works on the detached hills to the northwest of the city, to the Saltillo Road. With this road in our possession, the enemy would be cut off from receiving further supplies, if not from all communication with the interior. General Worth, with his division somewhat reinforced, was given the task of gaining possession of the Saltillo Road and of carrying the detached works outside the city in that quarter. He started on his march early in the afternoon of the 20th. The divisions under Generals Butler and Twiggs were drawn up to threaten the east and north sides of the city and the works on those fronts in support of the movement under General Worth. Worth's was regarded as the main attack on Monterey, and all other operations were in support of it. His march this day was uninterrupted, but the enemy was seen to reinforce heavily about the bishop's palace and the other outside fortifications on their left. General Worth reached a defensible position just out of range of the enemy's guns on the heights northwest of the city and bivouacked for the night. The engineer officers with him, Captain Sanders and Lieutenant George G. Meade, afterwards the commander of the victorious National Army at the Battle of Gettysburg, made a reconnaissance to the Saltillo Road under cover of night. During the night of the 20th, General Taylor had established a battery consisting of two 24-pounder howitzers and a 10-inch mortar at a point from which they could play upon Black Fort. A natural depression in the plain, sufficiently deep to protect men standing in it from the fire from the fort, was selected and the battery established on the crest nearest the enemy. The 4th Infantry, then consisting of but 6 reduced companies, was ordered to support the artillerists while they were entrenching themselves and their guns. I was regimental quartermaster at the time, and was ordered to remain in charge of camp and the public property at Walnut Springs. It was supposed that the regiment would return to its camp in the morning. The point for establishing the siege battery was reached, and the work performed without attracting the attention of the enemy. At daylight the next morning, fire was opened on both sides and continued with what seemed to me at that day great fury. My curiosity got the better of my judgment, and I mounted a horse and rode to the front to see what was going on. I had been there but a short time when an order to charge was given, and lacking the moral courage to return to camp, where I had been ordered to stay, I charged with the regiment. As soon as the troops were out of the depression, they came under the fire of Black Fort. As they advanced, they got under fire from batteries guarding the east or lower end of the city and of musketry. About 1/3 of the men engaged in the charge were killed or wounded in the space of a few minutes. We retreated to get out of fire, not backward, but eastward and perpendicular to the direct road running into the city from Walnut Springs. I was, I believe, the only person in the 4th Infantry in the charge who was on horseback. When we got to a place of safety, the regiment halted and drew itself together, what was left of it. The adjutant of the regiment, Lieutenant Hoskins, who was not in robust health, found himself very much fatigued from running on foot in the charge and retreat, and, seeing me on horseback, expressed a wish that he could be mounted also. I offered him my horse, and he accepted the offer. A few minutes later, I saw a soldier, a quartermaster's man, mounted not far away. I ran to him, took his horse, and was back with the regiment in a few minutes. In a short time we were off again, and the next place of safety, from the shots of the enemy that I recollect of being in, was a field of cane or corn, to the northeast of the lower batteries. The adjutant to whom I had loaned my horse was killed, and I was designated to act in his place. You are listening this book at VolantLife Radio. This charge was ill-conceived or badly executed. We belonged to the brigade commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Garland, and he had received orders to charge the lower batteries of the city and carry them if he could without too much loss, for the purpose of creating a diversion in favor of Worth, who was conducting the movement, which it was intended should be decisive. By a movement by the left flank, Garland could have led his men beyond the range of the fire from Black Fort and advanced towards the northeast angle of the city, as well covered from fire as could be expected. There was no undue loss of life in reaching the lower end of Monterey, except that sustained by Garland's command.